This is Lalita, your host for Mushrooms on Mars. Welcome back, and this is episode 7, where we will be doing a deep dive discussion on the BPS system. The BPS system stands for Biomass Production System. It was one of the earlier plant growth systems on the ISS. It is no longer operational. And what we learned from the BPS is what we used to develop the APH system, the automated plant habitat. It's completely automated. APH came later, but it's only because of BPS we knew how to design it properly. So BPS was designed to study plant growth in microgravity. We didn't know how plants would react when there's an absence of gravity in space. We take it for granted on Earth because the roots go down, it takes in the nutrients, and then there's a distribution network within the plant. The leaves come out, the fruiting happens, then it sets seed. We've seen that part, but everything goes haywire when there's no gravity. The first thing that happens is roots don't know that they have to go down. The trunk or the stems, the branches don't know that they have to grow up. So it grows and it's very haphazard. It grows in all different directions. The leaves might curl. The roots might not be able to take in the nutrients or the water. So it's just very random. The power of gravity is a guiding force for all of our plant systems here on Earth. So we learned a great deal about plant biology in space, mostly because of the BPS system. So we also found out that microgravity will affect plants at a molecular level. There are cellular changes. So it influences gene expression. It influences protein production. So the absence of gravity also affects how the plants will absorb and distribute water and the nutrients. And they also showed stress response. Now, this could be because of radiation levels that are different in space. And we also found out that plants can set seed in space, and they're viable seed. Pollination is possible, seed formation is possible. It is challenging, but it can produce viable seeds. It's not easy. It's not straightforward as it is here. Then some plants grew faster, some of them grew more slowly, and then they were more sensitive to light in space. It's probably due to the lack of gravitation. So there was no cues for orientation, so we know up, down, all that stuff here. Let's just say the plants were directionally challenged, just like I was before the GPS came along. I'm just going to digress for a minute because I like to say this often about how I have seen things change just within my lifetime. Okay, we've heard our parents say it, older people say it, and now I'm starting to say it, which kind of dates me. But I remember a time when I used to have this McNally maps, okay? And before any trip, a hike, or a vacation, we'd go to AAA, pick up the maps, the paper maps. The guy there will draw the route in a yellow highlighter. I remember that. That is within my reachable memory. But now it's not just the GPS. The car drives itself. Enough said. Okay, so that's where we are. The reason I brought it up is I already feel like I've been to space because I am very directionally challenged. So the plants in space are like me. They're directionally challenged. So we figured out all that with these experiments. And light sensitivity, water management, microbial interactions, microgravity affects everything. So It was the BPS system that kind of gathered all the data points for this, and then it paved the way for the APH system. The APH system is automated and it can be controlled, the environmental controls. The data, it can all be accessed and it can be manipulated from Earth remotely. Can you imagine? Like, we can grow food in space and control it from here. Now, that is no reason to imagine that we can wreck our Earth and get our food from space. No, because in a 1 acre farm, in a small urban farm, you can grow 40 different kinds of vegetables in 1 year within the 4 seasons in California, because we have 8 glorious months of sunlight, and really we can grow anything here. Space is not that generous. So we're testing like radishes and lettuce and peppers and tomatoes and wheat so far. But the main goal of these plant growth systems is to create a fresh supply of food for the astronauts and people who are spacefaring, so they don't have to rely on resupply missions to top up, So that's a goal. So the deep dive is going to be about the BPS system. So onwards, let's move on.
Ever dreamt of biting into a crisp, fresh vegetable on Mars?
Yeah, that's a thought.
It might sound like science fiction, but that's the reality space farming is working towards. Today, we're taking a deep dive into how it all works, from its humble beginnings to, who knows, maybe even feeding future Martian colonists one day.
And that's just it, isn't it? It's not just about astronauts getting a taste of home.
Right.
It's really about tackling the challenge of sustainability in space, which is absolutely crucial for those long-term missions everyone's always talking about.
Makes sense. We can't exactly be sending supply rockets to Mars every time someone wants a salad.
Exactly. Space farming is really about creating this closed-loop system.
Okay. Yeah.
A sort of self-sustaining mini-Earth in space where resources are, constantly being recycled, like the ultimate sustainable living experiment. But in space.
Now, we've all heard about astronauts growing lettuce on the ISS, but I'm guessing it didn't just start there.
Oh, absolutely not.
What can you tell me about the BPS system?
The Biomass Production System, or BPS, as I'm sure it quickly became the granddaddy of space farming.
I love it.
Yeah, before we had the Veggie or the APH systems we hear so much about today, you had the BPS pioneering plant research up on the International Space Station.
So really starting from scratch.
In many ways, yeah. And you see, it wasn't just about managing to grow food, which is hard enough as it is. It was about answering a fundamental question. How do plants even function in microgravity? How do they grow?
Yeah, because gravity, or the lack of it, that's got to mess with how plants grow.
You would think, right, and you'd be right to think so. BPS was all about figuring out how this weightless environment affected everything from something as basic as how the roots grow to how the plant's taking up water and nutrients.
4 separate chambers, huh? That's wild. They were serious about this.
Oh, they were. It really was a different time. This setup let them test out a bunch of different things at the same time.
Okay, I see.
So, for example, you could have one chamber with a totally different light cycle than another, and then another with a different mix of nutrients and all that. This meant they could really pinpoint what effect microgravity was having on top of everything else.
That's really clever.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing no soil involved, right? It was
Yes.
all hydroponics.
You got it. Hydroponics was perfect for the BPS. I mean, think about it. Way lighter than trying to lug soil up into space. And it gives you this, incredible level of control over what the plants are actually getting for their nutrients.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But if there's no soil, How do you even make sure these plants are getting what they need?
So picture this. You've got this system delivering a nutrient solution straight to the plant's roots.
Direct injection, kind of?
Yeah, exactly. Like a little IV drip, but for your space veggies. And it wasn't just any old light helping these plants grow either.
Wow.
They were using these high-tech LED lights, which, let me tell you, were pretty cutting edge back then.
LEDs for growing plants. I mean, that's pretty standard now, but back then...
You wouldn't believe it. But LEDs gave them something you just couldn't get with anything else at the time control. With the BPS, they could program these LEDs to, mimic different types of sunlight, like they could make it like Earth, or even, get this, simulate the light on Mars.
Wait, hold on. They were simulating Martian sunlight back then.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. What else did they think of?
It gets even better. To keep track of all of this, the BPS was completely decked out with all kinds of sensors that were constantly tracking every little detail about the environment, the temperature, the humidity, even how much carbon dioxide the plants were sucking up.
It's like a high-tech greenhouse, but in space.
Exactly. And then all of that data, all of it gets beamed back down to Earth, which meant scientists could just sit back and have this 24/7 view of how their little space garden was doing.
That's incredible. But I have to ask, with all that technology, all those experiments, what did we actually learn from the BPS? It sounds like the BPS was just this gold mine of information. What would you say were some of the biggest aha moments that came out of those experiments?
Well, I think one of the most surprising discoveries, honestly, was just how different plant growth is in microgravity.
Yeah, you figure it'd be different, but how so?
Well, we knew it would be different, but the BPS really showed us all these effects we hadn't really anticipated. For example, think about how roots grow.
Okay, Dan, they were right.
Right. Here on Earth, gravity pulls them down, so they've got this, pretty clear direction to grow in. But up in space, that's gone.
No, up or down.
Exactly. And the BPS showed us these roots growing in all sorts of crazy patterns, spiraling, looping, even growing upwards.
Wow, space roots really do their own thing.
Right.
But did those weird growth patterns actually affect the plants in any other way?
Oh, absolutely. See, the way water and nutrients move through the plant, that's totally different without gravity, too.
Oh, right. Like trying to water a plant on a roller coaster.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to work quite the same way, is it? These insights from BTS, they were really crucial in actually helping design those more efficient irrigation systems we see in space farms now.
That's fascinating. Makes you realize we really take gravity for granted down here. Any other big surprises from the BPS?
One really interesting finding had to do with light. So plants on Earth, they've evolved to grow towards the sun, right? Phototropism.
Right. I remember learning about that.
Right. But in space, it's different. It's this disorienting environment. Microgravity and light becomes even more important. It's like a crucial directional cue for the plant.
So space plants are basically navigation experts. That's so cool.
Yeah. And the BPS, what it did was it helped us measure how important that really is.
What?
How important light is for everything from which way a leaf is pointing to when it flowers and all of that. It really highlighted how adaptable plants really are.
Incredible. All that, and to think, this was all from those early experiments with, what was it, wheat, mustard.
Yeah, even Arabidopsis.
Right, that little one. So obviously the BPS, a huge leap forward, but I'm guessing it had its limitations.
Of course, yeah. One of the big ones was just the sheer scale of it. It was relatively small.
Right. A couple of plants isn't going to cut it on a long-duration mission to Mars.
Exactly. No, you'd need a lot more to sustain a whole Martian colony. So scaling things up, that's key for those future missions.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Well, the other big thing was the energy requirements. All those climate-controlled chambers, all that fancy monitoring equipment, it took a lot to keep the BPS running.
Oh, right.
So designing a system that's, productive but also energy efficient, that's a big challenge going forward, especially as we get further and further away from Earth.
It really sounds like the BPS created the foundation for everything we know about space farming today.
It really did. Yeah.
But there's still so much to learn if we're ever going to get to the moon or Mars long term.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how do you even begin to grow food in lunar dust? Or adapt to the lower gravity on Mars? We still got a lot to figure out if we want to make space exploration sustainable, but the BPS, it gave us a place to start.
And who knows what incredible discoveries we'll make along the way. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the world of space farming. A huge thank you to our expert for joining us and walking us through everything. It's been a fascinating look at how far we've come, and pretty exciting to think about where space farming might take us next.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
So how was that? We spoke about the BPS system. Now, we have two more systems to discuss in subsequent episodes. One is the LADA system. It's called the LADA greenhouse, and the other one is a bioculture system. The next one we are going to speak about is going to be the LADA system. The LADA greenhouse on the ISS. I'm going to call it LADA. It just like rolls off my tongue. The LADA greenhouse is a plant growth system that was developed by the Russians for the ISS. It's not like the APH. It's not like the Veggie system. They are more complex, but LADA is a very simple but compact system, and it allows astronauts to grow crops in space and, of course, to study how plants behave in microgravity. So now the LADA greenhouse system, it is one of the earliest pioneering systems. It focused on closed-loop life support systems in space agriculture, and it provided a lot of insight into how plants would grow. It's like in all these little experiments that we did, eventually it led to something like APH. Right now, there are only 2 plant growth systems on ISS that produces food. Everything else is retired or not operational. So there's the Veggie system, that's an open air system, and then there's the APH system, which is the automated plant habitat, which is a closed environment system. So right now there's only those 2 on the ISS, but they stand on the shoulders of giants. They stand on the shoulders of LADA, on BPS, bioculture system. So it's all the information that we got from the older pioneering efforts where we identified the challenges for space ag or space farming. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next episode. So until then, goodbye.